And I'm David Hooten, so with the junior college, and well, you all know me, but for taping purposes, well, I will get the introduction here. Ground superintendent here for the college, and then the president of the Horticultural Society. And we're going to do a rose demonstration technique, hands-on pruning for people today. I want to talk about some of the varieties of roses. We're going to be trimming hybrid teas. We're going to be trimming some floribundas. I don't think we have any granite floras in the bed behind me here, but there may be a few, but there's a difference. A granite flora is actually a hybrid between the hybrid tea and the floribunda, and those are roses that have more like they have a flower like a hybrid tea, but they'll get 7 foot tall. So sometimes when you buy a rose and it shoots way up there real quick, you probably got the granite flora type rose. They look like a hybrid tea type rose. Then we're going to talk about the knockout roses. There's a series. There's earth kind, there's the knockouts, there's carpet roses. Different companies call them by different names. But these are roses that hug the ground. They are kind of a matte forming rose. They're not really something you trim like the regular hybrids that we want flowers from. These are for more landscaping value. They give you an area of a lot of show and a lot of color. And they just keep repeating that and repeating and repeating. Where on a hybrid tea type rose like these right here, they're going to grow up, they're going to flower in early in the spring that we're fixing to come into, and then they're going to kind of subside, and then they're going to have to grow again and put another spurt of growth on, and then they'll have another succession of growth. But they grow, bloom, stop, grow, bloom, stop. They kind of have a succession. But as a rose enthusiast, there's things you can do to keep them flowers coming through the whole season of the summer on that part of it. And what I've got here today is an assortment of tools, some chemicals. I got some Clorox, and everybody's going to say, well, what do we need Clorox for? Well, if you're an excellent good rose enthusiast, and you're trimming your roses, a lot of roses, and we've got some in this garden behind me here right now that's got what we call rose canker disease. And that can be transmitted on your pruning tools. As you're making a cut into some of these, you'll get that virus on this cut, and so you want to use a Clorox and ever so often go through and disinfect your blades on your pruners, and that prevents that contact through each succession of roses that you're cutting on that part of it. That particular disease, there's no cure. It'll eventually take out your rose bush, but the rose will try to stay actively growing as much as it can until it just kind of succumbs to it on that part of it. Tools. The first thing you want to have on, and it's a bad day to have on long sleeve shirts, but when you're doing anything with roses, with the thorns, you want to protect your skin, you want to have gloves, and there's all kinds of things like that. Tim was talking about having chaps a while ago. They do make some chaps that you can put on your arms and kind of protect from the thorns, but have a long sleeve shirt on, or a coat or something. Then we want to go into different types of hand pruners. You have anvil type, then you have the bypass pruners right here. I'm going to open this one up and we can look at it, because they have different cutting styles and techniques. On a bypass, when it cuts, it bypasses the bottom piece here, the blade on the bottom. It cuts and bypasses. We have one here that's called an anvil. These are not the best for roses, because an anvil cutter is more for woody type wood, but it'll work. Get this thing open here. And when I say anvil, it has a place here at the bottom that the blade fits into, so it actually will crush some of those softer woods, and that's not a good thing, but on that part. So there's different styles. And then when you look at the bed of roses, you can see here there are larger canes. There's some 1-inch canes in there. So trying to get a hand pruner like this around a 1-inch cane is not going to happen. So we go to the next size up. You can go to a lopper like this. It's a pruning lopper. That'll take anything out from a 1/4 inch to up at about 3/4. And then when we get to the 1-inch stuff on the canes, you're going to need a bigger lopper. Now that will take 1.5 inches down to 3/4, real easy. And there's all kind of styles of loppers out there, and so we'll be using these. And then you're going to say, well, why do I have hedge trimmers? Well, I'm going to talk about that too. So some roses, like these shrub roses here, they are so They grow rampant, and they have lots of little stems and twigs on them. They're kind of weedy. I'll use that term. And you can look here. See this, and this is a good way to trim them. This is a good, for this knockout rose right here, this is a good representation of trimming one of these. But a lot of times, if you don't want to cut them this short, you will leave them up 18 inches, 2 feet. Then you want to take these, and I'm going to demonstrate this on a couple over here in a minute, but you want to go in and chop them back with this. Because there's so much tiny, tiny growth in here, you'd be all day trimming this stuff out. So we're going to talk about that. Excuse me a minute. Now I want to talk about roses in itself. I said there's hybrid teas, there are grandifloras, floribundas, and then we get into polyanthus. There's a lot of different roses down to your miniature roses. Lots of varieties in between. There's climbers, but but you go to the store to buy them. You want to buy rose bushes that somewhat have what I call the bird nest look. Like you take your fingers and you hold it up like this for the tape here, and that gives you an open look of that rose bush. Now when you look at this knockout, do we not have that similarity in that rose, in the way that's growing? You want your rose to be always open and growing outward and not inward, because when it starts to grow inward, it's shading the other stuff. It'll drop foliage, it'll start rubbing branch to branch and transmit some sort of disease component sometimes. So you want them to be open, and it could be in 3s, it could be in 5s, it could be in 7s. And nature doesn't normally have 4s and 2s, and it's usually odd numbers if you look at stuff. So we want to trim it, and it's more natural looking in an odd formation. But sometimes the growers and the packagers, you'll come out with a nice four cane one. Really, on this rose right here, on this hybrid tea, it's not this. It's got 2 main canes, but then this is really a good rose piece right here. So this is a good rose. And let me make a real strong word here. You pay for what you get. If you're going to buy cheap stuff, you're going to have a cheap rose. You buy a good rose like these 2 on the end right here, you're going to have a nice rose that's going to produce and do things for you. You know, when I say cheap rose, the rose growers in South Texas, California, Oregon, those places, they're going to sell everything there is on the farm field. And it's going to go to Kmart, Walmart, and I'm maybe not named names, but I'm just going to tell you, these are from Home Depot, and they do have some good stuff. But this is a cull. Now, will it grow in your yard? Yes, it will. It'll grow there, but you're going to have to baby it along. It does have one nice cane. It's got one up here. But again, you got this thing. And so you're going to have to learn how to trim this and train it to grow other canes out to make it a better full rose, or it's just going to be one-sided, lopsided plant. And you can see the lopsidedness of it right now. It's not uniform. And sometimes you'll buy them in, and this is a number 1 year grade rose. And sometimes you get a 1 year grade, and when you get the package, it's this stuff. It's the twigs. And so that's the culls that they're selling on the market. So you want to buy what's out there that's got nice 1 grade. On number 1, these are 1.5 year old shoots. And when you get into a rose like this has usually been grown in the field for 2-3 years, and then you get the nice big canes. And the roses in the field will be about this high. And so they go through, at the time to harvest these roses, they go through with a big machine and just cuts them all off. They shear them off out there. This is an all mechanical operation. Nobody goes out and does rose pruning like we're going to show about today. This is a mechanical. These are farm field roses. That's just a crop. And they have machines that go through and get rid of all the top, and then they go back in and start digging these up by machine. Again, you got to look at roses when you're buying them. Now, whether it's a good brand or the mediocre or the culls, this looks like a good one, and it is until you look at it split. Well, it looks good. It's got buds coming out. Yeah, it does. But if I cut that off, what have I got? You've got 1 cane. So I would probably, now for me as a gardener, I could put this out and do something with it. I could go back and cut everything off right here, or I might let this grow up and feed this bud down here and try to grow this bud out here into a new cane coming out and get something going on the plant. But again, this is something you got to work with. And do you want to spend that much time and effort when you can buy a better plant? And that's my pitch. So you pay for what you get. And this is a good plant. This would have been a good one. There's nothing wrong with that rose, other than it's got the split. And so that would have bypassed, because once this wood opens up like this, and you've got the white wood in there, then you've got bacteria and you've got fungus that gets in there on that wood. And if you tried to take wire or something to close that back up, you've sealed that in there and you'll get some sort of cane rot started. And so you'll have a disease in your rose. So you can just bypass things like this. And this can happen buying Jackson & Perkins, Armstrong roses. You go to Lubbock or a major nursery in the area, Midland, Odessa over there, and you're buying the roses that are in the cans. So you really got to look at the canes and how they are, and see if they've been mistreated, how they've been packaged, put on the trucks, and they're not crushed, bruised, damaged. And so you want to look for this kind of stuff. But again, you want to look for roses that basically have a shape like this, because these are the premium roses. This one here was $14.98, because it's a brand new introduction. So the new introductions are going to have they're going to be a premium price. You know that. Now, if it's in a can, it's probably going to be a little bit more, because you're going to have the canning cost on there, the labor of potting it up and putting it in the can on that part of it. So it may be $25, $26 if you go to a nursery. But like this, they're bare root. And when I say bare root, I mean that's got some peat moss in here, sphagnum moss. You take this home, you get your hoe ready, and you want to over dig the hoe. Don't try to cram this in a $5 hoe. You want to dig a $10 hoe. I'm going to use this terminology. Nice and wide. And then when you take this out of the package, spread them roots out. And what I do before I put this in the ground, I would take this home, soak it in a tub of water. Maybe take this off and just put the rose roots in there. Or you could cut some holes in this plastic liner and soak them roots and rehydrate the roses a day before you plant it. Now, they're supposed to keep these kind of wet, but like I was telling the group here earlier, that when you have the packing material above it, then like the sphagnum moss above it, it's like a sponge. The air can get to it. As the air blows over it, it's wicking that water up out of the roots. The whole sponge content is being wicked away from the roots. So put it back in a bucket, cut some slits in this, just set it down there for an afternoon or next morning, then go out and plant it. Now, when you plant these out in the garden like this that are bare root, take the roots out and feather them out, pull them out, tease them out. It's like rat hair in your hair, rats in your hair. Pull it out, stretch them out, because you're going to have feeder roots. You're going to have roots the size of your finger, and then you might have some what we call anchor roots. Anchor roots are going to be the big roots that kind of anchor the rose bush in the ground, like on a tree. Same thing. And then you want those to be feathered out in the hoe in there. And these have all been grafted. Now, what's the graft? Yeah, let me look here a minute. When you peel this down, there's a knob right there, and they cut into this knob. The base of this plant is a wild rose bush, and it's wild because it's hardy, and it's going to grow. It's going to produce a lot of food to push up into these hybrid roses. The hybrid itself may not have a lot of root structure to it if you just had a hybrid on its own roots, and so it may have a lot of scraggly roots. So out here in New Mexico, Lee County soils, you know, we got the wonderful soil of the world. It's going to have a hard time trying to grow. So they put it on a wild multiflora rose, and that if most of us know what the wild rose looks like, or we come from country where it grows on the fence lines. So on that, they put the buds, and these are all budded pieces of the hybrid tea rose that we want. And so there's a connection. And when we talk about grafting, pecan trees and fruit trees are all budded the same way. They're on a wild rootstock, and then they have the hybrid on top, what we want to eat as a peach or a western sly paper shell pecan. It's the same difference. And so you want that graft to set. If my fingers were the soil line, you want that graft, that union, bud graft union, to set above the soil line. And why? If you put it below the ground, usually the top will die. And then what happens, it stimulates the wild rootstock to come out. And then the next thing, you've got these wild, wispy branches coming out from this plant here, which is the wild climbing rose bush. It's not your hybrid tea. And if you do that on peaches and other grafted things, you do the same thing. you'll eventually kill the top, and you'll get the wild variety coming out. So with that said, that's kind of an introduction to the roses and pruning, and these are fairly well pruned. But again, these